What is going on, everybody? We got Jordan Elliott from NinersNation in the building. How are we doing today, Jordan, on this beautiful off-season day?
I spent the entire weekend moving, so as anybody who's done it knows, it sucks. So any day I'm not doing that is a fantastic day. So I am just the mood is electric. It's all up from here. I am just thrilled because it could not possibly be worse than the last few days, to be honest.
Well, glad you're starting to get settled in. Clearly, you're in your new spot. We're gonna have to get that backdrop back to where it was. It was heading towards peak backdrop efficiency there for a second, but we'll get that back. And jumping right into it, Jordan, we haven't really talked about it much, and to kind of let the viewers know. We're going to talk about free agents. We're going to talk about free agents surrounding the San Francisco 49ers, who we are potentially bracing for eventual like leaving in free agency, who might come back and kind of rationalize it all and get through all of that. But before we start, Jordan, there's a lot of quarterback conversation going around these parts. I thought the 49ers had their quarterback figured out with Trey Lance. Do you think they do feel that way, or is there something else coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, man, I never like taking shots at the people who are in sports media, especially people who are like way more established than myself. And if anybody's on, I'm assuming you're referencing the ESPN and the NFL Live stuff. Okay, if you make it to that platform, you've paid your dues, you've worked hard, you're at a level that I'm hoping to achieve one day. So I'm not going to try to sit here and take shots at people like Booger McFarland. I do think though that I don't put much stock in that opinion because based on his comments, it was quite clear that he didn't really watch Trey Lance as much as you would hope somebody would have, somebody who's going to have that kind of opinion. You'd hope they'd at least be like, hey, I watched all his snaps and this is what I came away with. I didn't feel like that at all. And I just feel like, Ryan Clark had a similar take last week where I was just kind of like, what the heck is he talking about, man? Like, what? It just didn't make any sense to me. He mentioned how the Bears and the Jaguars felt comfortable putting out players to win now that were rookies, and they won like 8 games combined between the two of them. Like, so there's just a lot of stuff. I hate to put it this way, man. Like everybody fills off-season content differently. You guys know Brad's the GOAT at off-season content. He's going to keep stuff coming out every day. Not everybody is Brad Graham, and some people need to take the easy way out in order to get attention and get traffic towards their network or their clicks or their work, whatever. And the easiest way is to just drum up quarterback controversy. They've seen the way that 49ers Twitter goes to war over quarterbacks for the last couple of years. And I think that, unfortunately, ESPN's catching on to the fact that, hey, if you say something controversial about Trey Lance, then you're going to have, a lot of people come and talk about your stuff. And even if they disagree, like the ultimate end game of all of this is to have people interact with your stuff. So I really think it's like boredom and like lack of having something concrete to talk about, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the first part of that offseason wave where all the Super Bowl hypes died down, and it's kind of like, all right, let's start taking a look at the next year, forecasting what's going to happen. And obviously, there's a lot of news around Tom Brady, or not news, but a lot of speculation. Do you think there's any legs to that, or is that just one of those things? It's the offseason, and it kind of is what it is. It's going to come, and the 49ers are a team that is positioned to win a Super Bowl. So any type of potential moving piece that wants to win now is just always going to be tied to the 49ers, no matter what.
It's interesting because, there's always going to be that element of Tom Brady growing up here. I'm from the Bay Area too. Like I can understand there being, no matter how successful you get in life or wherever you may travel or play or do, like there's always going to be some kind of appeal to come back here. Like this is a very desirable place to be. And if I remember correctly, Brady mentioned something about wanting to be able to play games consistently in front of his parents, who I believe still reside in San Mateo, and his family who's still here. Because obviously they've seen him play, but it's different when you're driving, 30 minutes to Santa Clara versus flying across the country to Tampa Bay or New England. So I'm not putting too much stock into it, but I also don't think it's like, completely out of the realm of possibility, simply for the fact that it always was like, when you're Tom Brady, like you've accomplished everything. And when you're somebody who has that level of success, at a certain point, it's like, you're playing for the love of the game, but there's also like, what else is there really left to accomplish? And I think if you were to hypothetically play for the 49ers, it would do two things. He could win a Super Bowl with 3 different franchises, which I don't know off the top of my head, but I can't think of another quarterback who started and won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different teams. So that would put him, he's already in that like elite tier by himself. That would put him into like an untouchable tier that probably won't be matched. I don't see anybody winning, 8 Super Bowls with 3 different franchises combined. And it also would give him the opportunity to kind of go out on his own terms. And, it feels again though like it's kind of just noise. So it's something where like, yeah, it'd be cool if it happened, but I'm not sitting here every day like on Tom Brady watch, like, oh my God, is he going to come? Like, man, I got friends who are Broncos fans who cover that team. They're tracking every single one of Aaron Rodgers' moves. They're cryptically reading Instagram posts and all. I'm not doing that with Tom Brady, man. Like, I think Trey Lance is going to be more than fine, but I would have a hard time if Tom Brady was like, hey, I'm down to come play for you guys if you'll have me. Like, it feels like they said no once. I feel like it'd be really stupid to do it twice. So it's kind of just, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I'm not losing sleep at night over it.
I agree. I apologize for the whatever issues I'm having right now. My camera and potentially Wi-Fi are not on the same page, but hopefully it gets back here on track soon. Let's talk about some of these potential free agents for the San Francisco 49ers. And we'll start with whoever you kind of have been thinking about. Maybe we'll start with Laken Tomlinson. I think Laken Tomlinson has been a player that the 49ers have, at least fan base, has come to really enjoy. The victory donuts and how that kind of evolved last year. Plus, on top of the fact that Laken Tomlinson has been an Iron Man. I don't know if he's missed a game since he was traded from the Detroit Lions. Laken Tomlinson has been really, really well. Trent Williams has been emphatic with his praise and kind of urging the 49ers to re-sign Laken Tomlinson. But when we're looking at all the moving parts to free agency, understanding Deebo Samuel is likely going to get a potential blockbuster extension, Nick Bosa as well. The 49ers aren't going to be able to retain everyone, and there's approximately 28 free agents heading into this period. Starting with Laken Tomlinson, do you see a situation where Laken returns, or could it be a viable outcome that he actually gets more money in free agency than with the 49ers?
Yeah, so I wrote about this for NinersNation like a week ago, I think, 10 days ago. I don't know, all the days have kind of ran into each other lately. But I think that Laken Tomlinson, for all the reasons you mentioned, he's very durable. He's been a good player. He's, by all measures, a great teammate, a good person to have in the building. I think he's going to get paid, and I think he deserves every penny coming his way. I think he's been a consummate pro during his time in San Francisco. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of teams that could really use a Laken Tomlinson out there who just simply have more financial flexibility than the 49ers. Cincinnati, Miami are teams that come to mind who run a similar scheme, who definitely could use some upgrades on their offensive line, particularly on the interior. They might feel more comfortable giving Laken Tomlinson $10, $11 million a year. And I think that there would be no issue with that at all. He's a player who's proven that just staying on the field and playing at an average, like even at his baseline level of competence, if he's on the field for every snap, like you could argue that it's worth it to a team like that. For the 49ers, I don't think it is. And this is where it gets really hard, because I'm not saying that I don't think Laken Tomlinson isn't a good player or that he's not important to the team. I just think when you start weighing the cost of constructing a roster, you're going to have a hard time justifying paying Laken Tomlinson $10+ million a year when you have all these other guys who need to be taken care of. And on the flip side, so I touched on this in my article, you drafted Aaron Banks. He was a left guard at Notre Dame. He had impressive tape coming out of college. That's why the 49ers drafted him where they did. You move him to the right side. Brad's a former offensive lineman. He can tell you, like, I think fans just think it's like, oh, well, hey, we have a hole on this side. We're just going to move a guy and plug him. Like, when you get used to taking thousands and thousands of reps and practice and games on one side and you just move to the other, that's not an easy transition. And I do think a lot of the struggle that may have existed for Aaron Banks this year came from the fact that he was moved from the left to the right side. So I think ultimately you move Aaron Banks back to the left side, you put him in his natural position, and it does two things. I think he's going to perform better just based on the fact that he has all those years of experience on the left side. And Trent Williams is so good. When you pay Trent Williams the amount of money the 49ers paid him, you do it for a lot of reasons. And one of them is that no matter who you put next to him on his right side at that left guard spot, they're going to look better based simply on the fact they have Trent Williams there. And I don't think that that's a knock on Laken Tomlinson or whoever may fill that spot. It's just a fact. Like, he's such a good player that he's going to mask a lot of deficiencies that you may have with a player that you plug there. So I just think from a roster standpoint, if you were able to, and again, a lot of this is dependent on Aaron Banks going back and proving he can be a starting left guard, which I haven't seen anything that would make me think he can't. I can't confidently say that he will because, again, there's nothing to base it on. But if we're going off the college tape and what we saw, it's easy to project him at least sliding in and being an average level tackle at that spot. And if you can do that next to Trent Williams, I think you can still be a successful offensive line. And I think it ultimately just – it's going to come down to them making some tough decisions. They can't keep everybody. That's the cost of building a good roster in the NFL. Eventually, these guys are going to want to get paid elsewhere. And I think ultimately it just comes down to the fact that Tomlinson probably priced himself out, and he deserves to get paid, man. Like, at the end of the day, as much as I love to see these guys stay in 49ers uniforms, I'm pro player, man. Go get your money. Like, go take care of yourself and secure that generational wealth. And I hope that somebody pays Laken Tomlinson because, again, he's worth every penny.
Absolutely. And it's just, there's a lot of things to maneuver, right? There's so many moving pieces. Again, so we're looking at the list right here. There's so many names on this list of guys that you'd like to keep. You know, DJ Jones is a guy who really, you've been championing Jordan all year, and he's really deserved that praise. He's been balling out. Guys like Kwaski, who, you know, people are going to remember the last play that we saw him, but overall, the entire body of work that he did was really solid. Even Compton, for that matter. Again, people are going to remember the last thing they saw of him, but overall body of work, not too bad. With Laken Tomlinson, you know, with also too getting that Pro Bowl alternate, I think he kind of made himself a little bit more money at least to the effect that the 49ers might not want to make that type of investment in a left guard who's 30 years old. Although they have gotten great return on investment on him, they did, like you said, draft Aaron Banks, and yeah, guess what? This draft class has got some good offensive linemen in it as well. So if they do need to either go to free agency, get a little bit more cost-effective guy, maybe that happens. But I kind of agree with you there. I could see Laken getting the bag from somewhere else. Again, Miami feels like a pretty solid landing spot, right? With Mike McDaniels, and they're going to implement his running scheme, and Laken has been very successful in that. Could you see that being a really good landing fit for Laken and just making a really seamless transition?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you mentioned, like, the Pro Bowl nod does come into play here because ultimately, like, yeah, we as 49 people who cover the team or people who are fans of the team, like, we know what Laken Tomlinson brings to the table. I can promise you that casual fans of a lot of other franchises aren't really paying to the attention that would really magnify the value to another team's offensive line. So when you're the Miami Dolphins or the Cincinnati Bengals, like, at the end of the day, it's a business, and you need to be able to sell your fans and sell them that you're doing things to improve your team, no matter how much success or lack of you have the year before. And it sounds really good to say, hey, we're bringing in a guy who was a Pro Bowler in 2021 to come in. This is why we're paying this big deal, rather than people being like, who the heck is Laken Tomlinson? Why are you giving him $10 million a year? Like, that one distinction makes a huge difference when you're selling that to your team, especially when you see these free agent signings in NFL free agency. So, again, like, Laken Tomlinson, you never hear anything about him being a bad teammate. All you hear is positive things. We know he only misses snaps literally when his shoe comes off. That's the only time he's missed snaps over the last, 3.5, 4 seasons. He's a great player. He ultimately is going to get paid somewhere. And at the end of the day, it's just, again, part of the business in the NFL is you can't pay everybody, and you have to make decisions. And had the 49ers not drafted Aaron Banks last year, and had I not seen enough personally to think that he can fill that role, I would probably be more inclined to say, hey, you can't let Laken Tomlinson walk. But at the end of the day, if you're the 49ers, you have to show some courage in your conviction with these picks you're making. And if you're willing to spend a top 50 pick on Aaron Banks, hey, sometimes you miss. I get it. If they really feel that way right now, maybe you find a way to justify putting Tomlinson back in, or you find another solution in free agency. But if they still have the belief that Aaron Banks is their guy and they hit on that pick, you have to back it up with your actions at some point and allow him to come in and play. And I would say the same thing eventually when we get to DJ Jones. It kind of factors in with players like Kinlaw too. Like, if you're going to invest that capital in these players, they have to see the field at some point. And I think that at the end of the day, you're setting yourself up to make this departure with a player like Tomlinson a little bit easier when you have the foresight to draft a player like Aaron Banks a year prior. Because everybody just assumed he was there to fill the right guard spot. And that did two things. One, it was an assumption that nobody really had any basis behind. And two, it just disregarded Dan Brunskill. Like Dan Brunskill wasn't a pretty good right guard for them. So I think that never was like set in stone that the 49ers were just immediately trying to plug that right guard spot. Hey, if it worked out, great. But I still think that part of that pick was giving them some kind of contingency plan should Laken Tomlinson price himself out, which he probably has.
Absolutely. And that's all great logic. And it is partly to Aaron Banks. Like, what's good, Aaron? Like, it does appear like there is a potential that Brunskill can return, because if we stay on the offensive line and we hop down here, I mean, what Daniel Brunskill did for $850,000 last year was pretty nice. I appreciated it. But at 28 years old on a restricted free agent tag, the 49ers could tender him, and let's say Mike McDaniels comes after him as well. The 49ers could actually turn Daniel Brunskill into a draft pick if they opt to not re-sign him at whichever deal whoever wants to pay him to be that. Do you see a situation where that could occur, where actually Daniel Brunskill gets an offer, the 49ers decide not to match, they take the tendered pick and move on with their way? Or do you see a situation where maybe Brunskill sticks around because of that restricted free agent tag, and maybe no one comes knocking for him and they get him back for another, cost-friendly deal, team-friendly deal?
So I could be off, but if I understand it correctly with Brunskill in particular, I think his second round tender is around $4.5 million.
That's what I've heard as well.
Okay, yeah. So I believe just basically what that means is that if a team were to sign him for more, then the 49ers would effectively be awarded a second round pick and a compensatory pick, I believe, towards the back end of that second round. If a team's willing to pay Daniel Brunskill more than $4.5 million and you're getting the pick in return, it does make it very, difficult. But at the same time, too, it's also a matter of like, hey, if it's a difference of like $1 million, $800,000 or something like that, like Daniel Brunskill is much better than people make him out to be. People make it out to be like Dan Brunskill is like a liability of some kind. It's not true at all. He's been, for the most part, just like a league average, like right guard that can come in and play in the NFL. He hasn't been a liability. He hasn't been, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like he's been like a superstar or anything. I love the Aaron Donald jokes and stuff as much as anybody, but he's a good NFL player, and you don't want to just toss those aside lightly. And especially if you're making that tough decision, like the way I look at it, they can't afford to lose Tomlinson and Brunskill, especially if Alex Mack retires. You can plug one, maybe two holes on that interior of the line and get by okay. If you have to fill all three spots, it's really hard to do. And then on top of it too, you have to put Trey Lance in a position to succeed, man. Like we talked for, people talk for years about how, the interior offensive line was a liability, and they finally shore it up for Jimmy Garoppolo. And Garoppolo, he is who he is as a player, but he definitely looked more comfortable at times. The pockets were a little bit cleaner. The pass protection had improved. You have to put Trey Lance in a similar situation. So to me, they have to at least come from a position where they're projecting that they'll get at minimum the same level of production they got this year. So if that means that they feel like they can get league average production from, Banks replacing Tomlinson, they're somehow able to, keep Brunskill, and then hopefully Matt comes back. Like, to me, like, that's a win. I think you can go in feeling great. But what you can't do, in my opinion, is allow all three guys to walk and think through the draft or free agency you're going to be able to get back to that level of competence, which is extremely important, again, considering the 49ers finally felt like they figured it out this past season after having it be an issue for a couple of years. So they're in a tough spot, and Brunskill to me just is the most like feasible financially. Like, I would feel much more comfortable keeping Brunskill at $4.5 million than giving Laken Tomlinson $11 million. And that's no disrespect to either player or compare. It's just, again, this all comes down to dollars and cents at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat as you. If it came down to having to pick or choose with the price tag associated, it just feels like Brunskill's too good of a deal to pass up. And again, I think Sean also makes a good point in the chat. He can play multiple positions. He can play center. He can play guard. He can play tackle. You remember, Jordan, we were at the second day of training camp practice when they put the pads on. There was the media showcase, and good old Daniel Brunskill played exclusively at center with Trey Lance. And Trey Lance, I think, had one of his best days of practice of the entire training camp. that specific day. So there's so much versatility with Brunskill, and if you can keep him at a cost-friendly price, because again, sticking with the offensive line, and we're looking at free agents, who's coming and who's going, their backups are free agent. Tom Compton's a free agent, and Jake Brendel is a free agent, who are the two guys that they rostered throughout the entire year as the backups. Now, you can probably get Jake Brendel for a little bit of nothing, so that's not really much of a conversation, and they could even just completely turn to a different person in that regard. But what do you think about Tom Compton? He's 32. He's going to be 33 next season. He played last year on basically $1 million contract, 1 year. And when he was called on, he actually did pretty well. Do you think he could come back as a potential swing tackle, especially with the kind of state in flux of the offensive line at this point?
So if you keep Brunskill, I don't think there's as much of a need to keep Compton. I think if you lose Brunskill, then yeah, you definitely bring back Compton, because I think both of them bring that versatility to play either guard or tackle.
Right.
I wouldn't feel overly compelled to keep both. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it either, but I don't think it's as much of a necessity if Brunskill is there, because Brunskill can play all three positions along the line. He can play tackle, guard, and center. So. Yeah, and GD5 makes a great point. Like, it really is hard to find guys that can seamlessly kind of transition and at least give you, like, again, you're not asking for a guy to go out there and have 5 guys play like Trent Williams. Like, that's not going to happen, man. Trent Williams is a generational player. You're not asking to have a line, an offensive line full of all pro guys. If you can just get average competence from an offensive line, especially when you have an anchor like Trent Williams, and then you have, really good scheme, and you have a quarterback who's a little bit mobile, like, yeah, it'll hide some of the deficiencies. All you really need is a league average performance for the majority of a season to be successful, in my opinion. And I think the 49ers can get that with a guy like Brunskill, and he can go to different positions and give them that baseline level of competence where you're not asking him to do, the incredible. You're just like, hey, don't be a liability, which I don't feel he really has ever been for a consistent amount of time. Like, everybody gets beat. That's the funniest thing with offensive line play. And I know Brad probably is more infuriated by it than I am, but people they get say they get 30 pass blocking reps in a game. If they give up 2 pressures, like, that happens. That's an NFL game. Like, guess what?
That's par for the course.
Defensive players in the NFL are really
You're going to get a bogey every once in a while.
Yeah, what you're not going to show is them stonewalling the guy on 27 other pass rushing reps. So, like, it's always funny to me is that you'll say, like, oh, this player isn't a liability, and somebody shows like a single play of them getting beat in a pass rushing rep. Like, congratulations, everybody gets beat. That's the NFL. The other players are really good too. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's just kind of funny to me.
Absolutely. And even though we are talking about free agency, and with, I think it's becoming pretty crystal clear that at least on the offensive side, the 49ers really need to figure out their offensive line, how those pieces are going to come together, because we look over at the skill positions. We look at Debo, we look at Ayuk. Yes, those 2 guys are under contract, and it gets a little sketchy after that. But you still got Kittle, you still got Juice, you still got Elijah Mitchell, you got Trey Lance. But they got to be able to protect and block to be able to get these guys open. So clearly, we got to figure out what is going on with this offensive line. But how do you feel about, the other rookie, Jalen Moore, 5th-round pick out of Western Michigan? Does he factor into this at all? Like, maybe they opt to bring back Jalen Moore instead of Tom, or just stick with Moore rather than bringing back Compton? What are your kind of thoughts on how he fits into the whole mix?
I mean, I'm always going to defer to Brad when it comes to offensive line stuff, because I think we do disagree with what I'm going to say right now. And he probably knows more than me. So I'll just throw that out there, full disclosure. I thought Jalen Moore profiled a little bit more as a guard, and I know Shanahan mentioned that during one of their initial press conferences after the draft. So I would not have a problem with him really sliding into either guard spot if they felt comfortable about it. But again, he's a guy who I believe he was left tackle at Western Michigan. So again, asking to go and play right guard isn't just going to be an easy task. There's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of development needed, and he probably needs some reps to get comfortable. But I think he has the athleticism that you need to succeed in this scheme, especially getting out and blocking in space. Again, he's not a guy I would feel overly confident about if let's say Mike McGlinchey's quad is taking longer to heal. I wouldn't feel, based on what I saw, a lot can change obviously between the end of the season and next season. I wouldn't feel great. I'd be lying if I said I was optimistic if they put him at right tackle. But I do think that, yeah, like he could feasibly play the guard spot. And I thought that he would have been the perfect candidate to be the swing tackle, even if he offers that kind of value based on where they picked him. Like if he can come in and just be a viable swing tackle for them, like I think that's a great value for the team. And I think that's a solid role for him that he could fill.
Absolutely. And so it's going to be something to watch, how they move these pieces around, because clearly also Colton McKivitz, even though he was cut at the beginning of the year, he wound up being a key start week 18 for Trent Williams when he went down. So the offensive line, it's just going to be something that is going to be so interesting to watch this year, how they retool it, how they rebuild it and restructure it, what's going to happen with Alex Mack. There's just so many questions. Are they going to draft more guys in the, obviously in the upcoming draft? There's going to be a lot of questions coming down the pipe, but I'm really, really excited to see what that turns into. But flipping to the other side of the football, let's talk about DJ Jones a little bit. I think DJ Jones really worked himself into, you know, I would say probably a priority free agent amongst 49ers fans. Would you say that is going to be the same amongst the actual 49ers front office?
Oh, it absolutely will be. And I don't think it'll be just the 49ers front office. I know Eric's in the chat, and Eric's always pretty spot on with his stuff. I guess that he's going to get $7 million a year. That's kind of like the floor for me. Like I think he's worth that, and I think teams that have watched him play will be more than willing to give him that. It's just so hard to find guys that are able to win the way he wins and have the kind of athletic ability that he has for a guy that's his size. Because you can find guys that are space eaters that aren't going to really do the spectacular rush the passer, but his ability to get off blocks and his ability to disrupt the running game and the pass game the way he does from that nose tackle spot, that's really, really hard to find. And again, this comes back to the 49ers might have to make a really tough decision. I 2 weeks ago was like, hey, you pay DJ Jones, whatever, blank check, give him whatever. Those of you who know Vish Kumaran, I was talking to Vish like a week ago, and he made a really good point that made me kind of like take a step back and remove my own bias, because I've thought DJ Jones was a really good player for a long time, and I'm happy he's finally getting that recognition. But he did make a good point, like, hey, the 49ers spent a top 15 pick on Javon Kinlaw, who wasn't healthy, and when he was healthy, he looked like a pretty good player, and he definitely was a guy that's just he's 6'6", 335. Like, he's going to be a space eater, eat up those double teams, fill those gaps in the run game. So it's hard because we don't know how that knee is responding. Obviously, the 49ers have a much better idea about it than any of us do. But if they can project that Kinlaw is going to come back and be healthy, like the way I look at it is you have two choices. You pay DJ Jones $7 million a year, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices elsewhere. You're going to lose out on some free agents and some guys in other spots, or you unfortunately make the really tough decision to let another team pay DJ Jones $7-8 million. You then keep Kinlaw and have him project to be that starter at nose tackle. You probably would have to plan on keeping Eric Armstead inside at 3 tech. And then what you do, in my opinion, is you then draft a guy who can come in and fill in on that rotation. There's a guy I really like out of Alabama. I've heard a lot of people whose opinions I respect. They think he's going to be a second, maybe like early third round pick. Fedarian Mathis out of Alabama. I've watched him a bunch. I think he's phenomenal. I think he would be a really good player to kind of plug in if they did lose DJ Jones, and just having him and Kinlaw rotate, eating space, allowing the Nick Bosa's and Eric Armsteads and these guys to really get off one-on-one against other parts of the O-line. Like, I think they'd be okay in that sense. But again, it's so hard to it's so hard to do this because it's all projection. Like, I can look at a guy and think he's going to be really good, but I know that DJ Jones is really good. And there's so much value in knowing versus projecting that it's really going to come down to, like, hey, if they let Laken Tomlinson walk, I would have a hard time seeing them let DJ Jones walk. But if they pay Laken Tomlinson, then I also see a really hard path for them keeping DJ Jones too. So I think those two are the biggest names to watch based on what they potentially could get and based on their value to the team as a whole. Like, I don't think there's a way they can keep both, unfortunately.
I think that's a great point, because when you look at the overall list, and there's a lot of guys on that list, but Laken Tomlinson and DJ Jones are kind of right there at the top. And we also understand trench play is regarded across the league, so people will pay for it. And especially, again, you have now 49er coaches across the league, so there's plenty of internal insight, whether it's Dolphins, whether, it's the Jets, Robert Saleh, they want to shell out to bring DJ Jones over to the East Coast. It can happen. So it's not only just the 49ers deciding that they want to pay someone, but it's like, well, if someone comes across and is like, hey, we have 10% more on the table and no state taxes, good luck trying to win that bid. So it can happen in either a bunch of different ways. It can happen the 49ers opt not to meet in the middle, or 49ers just get outbid in some certain instances. But let's get to more of some of the polarizing free agents for the 49ers. I had a great time kind of pigeonholing this episode into really just talking about the offensive line for about the first half an hour. So I feel really good about that. I feel like my goal was achieved and we did it. But now let's talk about some of the other guys. I think Jason Verrett is going to be an interesting target because what does it cost to keep him? What's the risk reward? And if you had to rationalize Jason Verrett, do you see that as a potential guy who could be coming back, or wash your hands, move on to the next?
Well, if you do it, and this is easy for me to say because I'm not involved in the negotiations, but if I was able to have a say, what I would do with a guy like Verrett is just have the contract be a 1-year deal that's extremely incentive laden. So basically, if he meets X amount of snap count, if he meets, X amount of games played, if he has a Pro Bowl season, like basically build, it'd be a lower average annual value in terms of guaranteed money, but build a path to him earning what he would deserve if he replicates that 2020 season he had. You just can't go out. Even that $5.5 million guaranteed they gave him this year. I don't see a way that I would feel comfortable giving him that without it being built in through not necessarily performance incentives, but more so just being able to play incentives. If they want to throw those in too, great. Maybe that's more appealing for him to come back. But yeah, there's just no way that you can confidently. Again, it's nothing against the player. It's nothing. He's just some of these guys. Sometimes their bodies just don't respond, and if you get hurt, the amount of times he's gotten hurt, it's really kind of like a fool me once, fool me twice scenario. If you're going to give them 5,
fool me like 7 times almost, it feels like with Jason Verrett.
Yeah, but
no disrespect.
But he's really good. Yeah. So his average annual value is 5.5 this year. I wouldn't feel comfortable about giving him, that again. I would give him probably 2.5 and then have it get up to upwards of 6, 7 with those incentives and bonuses, whatever you want to work in. But that's not my problem. That's Parag and John Lynch's problem. And they've shown they're really good at doing that. I know the 49ers there was a report from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. He's pretty good with his reporting. Yeah. So the Niners might kick the tires on Stephon Gilmore, I was reading. And he's another guy where it's the same thing. He's a former defensive player of the year. He had a lot of success, but he's also over the age of 30 and has injury history. So it's kind of like I see enough. Like the 49ers have shown that they're willing to bank on, guys with maybe some injury history within their own organization. The last time I can think of a player that they really took significant risk on who had injury history like that was Dee Ford. And maybe that changes their, reluctance to want to do it again. I don't know, or their willingness, I should say. Sorry, they might be more reluctant as a result to do it. So they got to address that corner spot, though. I think Emmanuel Moseley is fantastic. I think there's days where he definitely looks like a number one. But if in an ideal world, if you get a healthy Verrett or you get a healthy guy like Stephon Gilmore, a player like that, and you have Moseley, as the number 2, I think that's going to bode very well for them, especially with K'Wan Williams being up in the air, because I do think that they definitely, he's not like an irreplaceable player. He does a lot of things really well, and it's hard to find a guy who plays as physical around the line of scrimmage as K'Wan Williams does. And while he does get beat sometimes in man coverage, he's also really, really good against the run. And when you're playing teams like the Rams twice a year and the Seahawks twice a year, who are going to come out in 11 personnel, being able to come out in a sub-package defense with a nickel corner out there when the other team's trotting out 3 receivers and still being able to stop the run is huge. So you're not out there, having Tyler Lockett going one-on-one with a linebacker or having Cooper Kupp in the slot going one-on-one against a safety. It gives you a little bit more versatility with what scheme you can roll out there. So again, it's hard because what they do at that outside corner spot is dependent on what they do at the the nickel corner spot, and what they do at right guard is kind of dependent on what they do at left guard. So much of this isn't just cut and dry. It's going to be kind of like a domino effect based on what they do elsewhere.
The craziest thing too is does Alex Mack retire? And this isn't a part of really a free agent conversation, but do you think he does? And then the 49ers are either forced to look for a free agent center and or draft one.
I mean, they could have drafted Quinn Miners last year. We wouldn't even be in this predicament. I love Alex Mack. I'm a Cal football guy through and through. Go Golden Bears. It was really fun watching him play. But yeah. Quinn Miners was right there, man, and they didn't do it. They didn't pull the trigger. And I think he's going to be a really good player in this league for some time. I know a lot of people were upset about Creed Humphrey. I didn't really see the scheme fit with Creed Humphrey there, to be honest. And I do think that maybe it's not a huge deal, but I thought maybe the fact that he was also left-handed may have played into it. Like that actually, like you don't see too many left-handed centers. And maybe I'm overplaying that significance of that. But I don't think it was as simple as just, oh, they should have drafted Creed Humphrey. I wasn't saying that. I was screaming, and I know Brad was too, draft Quinn Miners. And they didn't do it. So if they have to find it this year, like it's kind of like let me play my little violin for you, because you had the opportunity to grab a guy that you could have developed, who could have filled multiple spots on the offensive line, who literally had never played the center position before in his life and came into the Senior Bowl and then just dominated with a broken hand. Like that, like stuff like that to me, like really, like you don't pass on players like that. And again, you're going to miss on players in every draft, but I can't help but feel like they missed a big opportunity to have an heir apparent to Alex Mack in Quinn Miners, even if he didn't see the field much last year. And now going forward, like if Alex Mack retires, like I don't see a guy on the open market where I'm like jumping up like, hey, they have to go get this guy like right now. That's going to be the same kind of, plug and play the way Alex Mack was. So I really hope he doesn't retire, because if he does, they're going to be in a really tough spot. So.
Or I apologize. My audio has cut. So Jordan, if you're probably spitting hot takes and hot fire, I didn't hear any of it.
Not drafting Quinn Miners for like a minute and a half or so. Honestly, that's all I was doing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you not hear me?
I'm having all kinds of technical difficulties today. How about this? Since you can hear me, I can't hear you yet, but we'll figure it out. We can still keep this rolling. We were talking about Jason Verrett. We talked about K'Wan Williams a little bit. Josh Norman. No, I'm just kidding. do the 49ers, do they look at Raheem Mostert as a potential return? Or is that you kind of view Raheem Mostert a little bit in the same category as kind of Jason Verrett? What are your thoughts on Raheem Mostert, who I think we would both agree is a very special running back?
Yeah, I would absolutely build in incentives into a deal with Mostert, because again, you can't throw out a bunch of guaranteed money at a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy, but you also can't afford to just turn your back on a player who's been by far, in my opinion, the best running back that Kyle Shanahan's had during his time in San Francisco. So I think that the biggest thing with Raheem Mostert is obviously his willingness to want to come back on a deal like that. But if he does, yes, don't even think twice about it. You will have such a hard time replicating that combination of explosive home run speed and vision. And the biggest thing to me with Raheem Mostert is that he brings an element of just like this 49ers running game is going to take care of itself in a lot of ways, based on the scheme, based on the blocking and all that. Like Matt Breda averaged over 5 yards a carry for 2 years. We saw Mitchell average like 4.7 this past year. And not to take anything away from those players, but they've shown that you can kind of plug and play guys in this scheme. But what Mostert does is Mostert has taken this offensive scheme and this running game to a whole nother level. It's forced teams to respect that outside zone home run threat more so than any other back the 49ers have had. And ultimately what it's going to do is that it's going to open things up a little bit more for Trey Lance. Like part of what the 49ers need to do this year is do whatever they possibly can to make life easier for Trey Lance. And having that home run threat with the vision that Raheem Mostert has, in my opinion, sets them up much better than if they were to just, continue kind of with Mitchell, Sermon. Maybe they bring Jeff Wilson back. Like all of those are fine running backs. Raheem Mostert is on his good days is in the discussion for the most effective. And I think he's a top 5 back. If you give me Raheem Mostert on like the 2019 NFC Championship game, like that to me, like that's a top 5 running back. He's shown he has the ability to combine that vision and speed, and it's just going to be so hard to find somebody who could come in right away and replicate that.
I'm going to nod my head and agree with absolutely everything you said, because I can't hear anything, but I know it's fire. Make sure you're commenting along in the chat so I can kind of keep track. But let's keep rocking. Let's keep rolling. The show must go on. I mean, we've gone through a good portion of some of these free agents for the San Francisco 49ers. Again, who should stay, who should go. Let's talk about Arden Key. I think Arden Key is going to be someone who I think fans do want. We've polled the fan base, and they do want to get Arden Key back into this defensive line rotation. Again, we saw some stuff from Charles Omenihu, who really started to pick up late. He's still got one more year on his rookie deal. And the fact that they got 6.5 sacks from a guy on a $1 million deal last year from Arden Key, who was essentially just left for dead by the Raiders. 49ers snatched him up, kind of retooled and recalibrated his career. Do you think he takes that and leverages that into a bag somewhere else? Do you think he wants to come back into the system? Maybe they find a middle ground, or do you think the 49ers it's just going to be too expensive to bring Arden Key back into the fold?
So with Key, it's interesting. So he signed for 1 year. It was $1 million and it was $1,045,000. So just over the vet minimum, which I believe was just north of $1 million. They're not going to get him anywhere close to that, in my opinion. If they're able to bring him back on like a 2-year, like maybe something similar to what they had with Ebukam, where it's kind of a lower cap number the first year, and if he really excels again, it jumps up to a higher number the second year. I won't pretend to be a guy who's, an expert on finances when it comes to projecting salaries and stuff like that. But just from a team building standpoint, I think if they can get him for less than $4 million a season, I would absolutely keep him. And here's why. What Arden Key does is he provides the versatility. Like I've talked for a long time about how I thought Eric Armstead's versatility to go inside out is extremely important. I think Arden Key's ability to kick inside as a pass rusher is so pivotal to this team. And I don't think there's any coincidence that once Arden Key did kick inside, that's when this defensive line really did take off and vaulted into, from a pretty good unit to one of the best pass rushing units in the league. And I think the ability to, we don't know what's going to happen with DJ Jones. We don't know how Kinlaw is going to respond. And the ability to have a guy like Nick Bosa or Ebukam on the outside and then have Armstead and Key on the inside when it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, another team's going to be passing. That's extremely difficult for another offensive line to prepare for. When you have 4 guys who can win like that and have that kind of versatility, it's just going to cause nightmares for opposing teams. So just based on his production and based on his versatility, if you can find a way to keep him, you have to do it. But again, if another team's going to pay him to be like, I don't think he's going to get premier edge rusher money, obviously, but if another team's going to pay him to come in and start on the edge and get a little bit more of a clear role to reps, and maybe he has with the 49ers, because to me, I'd feel happy paying him that $3.5-4 million a year just in a specialized role where he's a rotational guy on the edge and you bring him in on 3rd down to rush out of the 3-tech spot and, beat guards and beat centers. Like that, to me, he's proved he's worth every penny if you keep him in that capacity. But maybe another team is like, hey, we like Arden Key. We like his physical intangibles. We saw that when he's with a good supporting cast, he's a really good player. We'll pay him $7-8 million to come in and start at edge for us. The 49ers can't afford that. Again, it's going to come down to tough decisions. But yeah, he's a really interesting case study because he's not just an edge player. He's shown that his best value actually might come from rushing from the interior. And the amount of headaches that he and Armstead cause on the inside for opposing offensive lines, like that's, again, like the way I look at it when you're thinking about retaining players or letting them walk, you have to value how difficult it's going to be to replicate the success you had. And the 49ers defensive line was arguably their most successful unit by the end of the season. What are the odds you're going to find a guy to replicate the success you got from Arden Key? Really quickly, too, I don't know if he's still in here, but Eric, Barry Baller, was the first guy that I saw who was super high on Key when the Niners signed him last offseason. He was like, hey, give this guy time with Chris Crusader, give him time to mold. He's going to be really good. So I just wanted to give him a quick shout out. He was definitely way ahead of anybody else I saw when it came to Arden Key. So I just wanted to give him his flowers for that real quick.
Absolutely. And I must say, it's beautiful hearing your voice again, Jordan. I'm glad I was able to get everything figured out because I was missing you there for a second. But we're back. And I got to catch the tail end of that, and I agree. Arden Key, well, let me ask this. Did you say re-sign him, or what did you just really quickly?
So I just said that it's about money. If you can resign him for less than $4.5 million, yes. If it's anything more than that, no, you can't afford to do it financially.
I agree with that. And you kind of have Charles Omenihu is kind of in a similar archetype, where he can play edge, he can play over the guard and rush the passer. We saw success from both. Obviously, Arden Key really elevated his game later on down the stretch. But talking about a guy who plays right next to Arden Key at times and is probably one of the more forgotten 49ers, just based on the position that he plays. But I would say he probably had his best year as a pro. Kentavious Street, he's an unrestricted free agent. Do you think he will command high dollars on the open market, or do you think there's an opportunity for a return at a value for that works for both sides?
No, I think he'll stay, and I think it'll be interesting because I do think they're going to keep Kevin Givens too. So I think if they can keep one of the two, they'll be okay. If they can keep both, it'll be great. But with Street, again, he's another guy who gives you that versatility where he could hypothetically play edge on a given snap, and then on the very next snap, you can kick him inside. And I think they need as many bodies as possible because it felt like towards the end of the season, they didn't really have guys who could come in when DJ Jones and Armstead needed a breather on the interior that were going to play at a super high level. It felt like Street was really the only guy that was getting those consistent reps behind them there in big spots. So, do I think he's going to get top dollar? No, but maybe there's a lot of players I like on the free agent market, to be honest. So it's really going to be interesting to play out because the other thing we have to remember is as much as the 49ers have a lot of free agents they want to retain, a lot of other teams do too, and they're not all going to be able to. So Kentavious Street is a guy that, if they can get him back on a cheap deal, 1 year, 1.7, 2 million or something like that, yeah, sure. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but you might be able to find better value from a player who just might give you a little bit higher ceiling. And again, it comes back to how much they value that versatility to kick inside and out.
Absolutely. And kind of sticking on the kind of defensive line and moving around, because again, that's another position that's going to be in flux. A guy that you were extremely high on coming out of training camp. I remember there were multiple days sitting next to you, Jordan, where you're like, Jordan Willis is the best player at practice today. And I think we saw that down the stretch, especially in the playoffs. And we've also kind of seen how the locker room really responds to Jordan. And he's a man of few words, but they seem to really hold him in high regard. Is there a world that exists where they bring back a Jordan Willis again, kind of on a value deal, considering he's coming off the suspension and stuff like that? Or do you think he earned a little money there towards the end?
Yeah, no, he's a guy that I don't think he's going to get huge money. And I do think I'm always going to support players getting more money, but I also think that the human element does come into play. And I think a lot of these guys know that their best case scenario is playing on a defensive line with Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead and having Chris Kocurek and Darryl Tapp coaching you. And I think the 49ers have cultivated a culture and a roster that makes players be willing to say, hey, if it's the difference of, an incremental amount of money, I'd rather stay in San Francisco in a rotational pass rushing role. Because with a player like Jordan Willis, I thought he wasn't a liability against the run. But I think that, again, if I'm another team, I wouldn't feel great about throwing, a bunch of money at him to come in and be a 3-down edge for me. But if I'm the 49ers, I would love to have him in a rotational capacity and as a guy who you can throw out there in that 9-tech spot. He has really good bend. His athletic profile is really good. That's one thing coming out of Kansas State. So he was one of those guys where they were a really good athlete, but you had question marks about their pass rushing bag and their, the rest of the game. And I think since he's been here, we've seen the 49ers really tap into that athleticism and get the most out of him. And we saw even that block punt he had in Green Bay, that was all strength. He just he's bull rushing a long snapper. I'm not going to act like running over him.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work, man.
He's not just finesse. He has the power too. He has a good bag. And what really sold me was at training camp, he was the only player, because Nick Bosa, to full disclosure, Nick Bosa wasn't doing 11-on-11s. They were being careful with his knee and not really throwing him out there. So Nick Bosa excluded. Jordan Willis was the player that I thought gave Trent Williams the biggest headaches during training camp and was the only guy that I saw regularly beating Trent Williams and getting to the quarterback when they were doing 11-on-11s. And to me, that's a pretty good gauge of how well a player is going to perform going forward. If you're able to give Trent Williams the amount of problems that Jordan Willis did, the odds are you're probably going to be able to do that against lesser talent, obviously. And no disrespect to any other lineman, most of the players in the NFL are lesser talents than Trent Williams, because Trent Williams is a phenomenal generational superstar level player.
Bro, so, remember when Zettel was giving Trent Williams the work in practice, and then he just up and retired one day? I think you said it. You were like, "Oh, he played so good against Trent Williams." He said, "My career, I'm done. I've done everything I could do in my career."
You go out on top. If you beat Trent Williams and you're already marginally thinking about retirement, leave. Don't think you get to spend the rest of your life telling your kids, like, "Yeah, I went out beating the best left tackle in football." You don't wait till the next day to get pancaked by Dan Brunskill.
Right. You get your dub and you're like, "All right, I'm good. We'll take my check at the door. We're out." That was good stuff. Quickly though, Justin, I missed your super chat. Here it is. I got you, my guy. He says Jimmy for Jarvis Landry. So that would be Jimmy Garoppolo. Sounds like straight up for Jarvis to the Browns, or Jimmy straight up for Christian McCaffrey. What do you think? React.
I don't think it's like crazy, like on paper, but I don't think it's like feasible in reality, unfortunately. And here's why. So if I'm Cleveland, like I've said it a bunch of times, I'm not a big fan of Jimmy Garoppolo's. Like I thought they could have upgraded, but I also think Jimmy Garoppolo is a objective upgrade over what we saw from Baker Mayfield last season. And I think if Jimmy Garoppolo started 15 or 16 games for the Browns last season, then they would have been a playoff team. Is it a huge upgrade over Mayfield? Maybe not, but I definitely think he's better. And I think that he makes a lot of the throws over the middle of the field that Baker just wouldn't or couldn't this past season. So the only problem with that is, if I recall correctly, I think the Browns picked up the 5th-year option on Baker, so I think they're giving him like guaranteed money this year. I could be off there, so I don't know necessarily that it would work out. But like, if we're just talking like talent, like it would be an objective upgrade. And by all, whatever, I haven't really kept up with it much. I saw a couple of tweets from Jarvis, but if he's on his way out anyway, like it would make sense for both sides. I just don't think it's going to happen, especially it would. So much of this is optics, and unless you're getting like hey, if Aaron Rodgers wanted to go play for the Browns, like, yeah, you could sell that to your fan base. Like, all right, sorry, we got to get rid of, Baker Mayfield. If you bring in Jimmy Garoppolo and Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't come out and have a Pro Bowl caliber season and lead your team to a deep playoff run, then you're kind of just, in that same boat you were in, just slightly better.
It's just the Browns being the Browns per usual, right?
Yeah,
at that point.
It's kind of hard to sell that. And then in terms of McCaffrey, like, he gets hurt way too often for my liking, and his cap number is way too high. So I just like, for me personally, with the 25+ million you're going to clear up with Jimmy, I'd like to see them spread that around 5-6 different positions, add some depth, add some, add a really nice edge rusher on the free agent market. Maybe if Tart leaves, you fill that safety spot with a veteran guy. It just doesn't work for me financially. But I do think you're onto something, Justin, with the Jimmy for a player thing. I think we're so caught up in, are they going to get a 1st-round pick? Are they going to get a 2nd-round pick? I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a player included for that deal, whenever Jimmy Garoppolo gets dealt. So I think you're definitely onto something there. I just don't know that it would be those guys, but I am very intrigued to see who they might get back in terms of a proven veteran commodity, and maybe a pick on top of it too.
Right, too, because one of the things with Jimmy Garoppolo, he's plug and play. He's ready to go. We've seen it with draft prospects under Kyle Shanahan. Even if they get good draft prospects outside of maybe, let's say, Nick Bosa or guys like that, there is a process that comes along with development. It takes a year or two for things to really gel. So maybe, to like your guys' point, they just go out and they make a player for player swap. Screw the draft pick. Get someone that we'll go down the less need road and say F them picks. We're not going to grab a pick for Jimmy. We're actually going to get a player that can fill a need, a potential left guard if they wanted to swap out a lower deal for a high upside guy to replace for Laken, or get more edge depth or talent and or DB depth, whatever. There's plenty of scenarios that float around with Jimmy Garoppolo. My personal thoughts are, I just wouldn't. I think all your points are correct about the optics with the Browns. I personally, Jarvis Landry, would he be plug and play, ready to go, lock in? Yes, but he's getting up there in age, and I'd rather just, find a skillful type player like that in the 3rd, 4th round that could potentially develop into there. I don't need someone who's going to be as high caliber as he is at that slot position, especially with the 49ers seeming to value big slot. And McCaffrey, I would love it. I love the thought of it. but also the cost is a huge issue with that particular trade. So probably isn't going to work out with either one, but I like the thought process as well as trading Jimmy straight up for a player that is comparable for sure, because the 49ers are going to need it. There's a lot of free agents here on this list still that we haven't even talked about. You did mention Kwaski. We also have Mr. Dante Johnson. I mean, it's crazy. K'Wan Williams, Dante Johnson, Kwaski Tart, Jason Verrett, guys that have kind of been around this team for a while now. It could look a whole lot different next year. Do you see Kwaski potentially coming back and Dante Johnson sticking around and K'Wan, or is it just like, we kept the band together as long as we could, and maybe it's time to just turn the page?
I'll start with Kwaski, and I don't see him sticking around, and I think it's going to be a huge loss unless they're able to go out and get a veteran guy on the free agent market. I don't like the idea of just drafting a safety in the second or third round and counting on them to do what Kwaski Tart does. I know there's a lot of 49ers fans who just don't really care for him anymore because of one dropped pass in one game. Again, hey, I'm not going to tell anybody how to root for their team. If you want to have that feeling, that's fine. But to me, it's extremely immature and it's extremely childish to overlook 7 years worth of play based on one, mistake. And especially like even within the context of that game, like, hey, if that happened with a minute and a half left and he catched it, the game's over, the Niners take 3 knees, I'd be like, okay, I understand people's outrage. There were 10 minutes left in that game, and the 49ers offense didn't have a positive play after that point. Like, he catches that ball, they go 3 and out. Guess what? It's the same thing. Like, that's a team loss. So I just want to throw that out there. I think that it's a bit ridiculous that one play gets magnified the way it did. The 49ers aren't even in the playoffs. If in Cincinnati, Jesse Bates dropped a wide, he's still running today if he catches that ball that Jimmy threw at the end of the fourth quarter there. The 49ers missed the playoffs and they're not even playing. So, drop balls happen, DBs drop balls, it happens. So I just want to throw that out there that like Kwaski Tart's been a really good player. He's been really important for them. I wrote an article about it in like December. If you guys want to go look, it's on NinersNation if you look it up. The numbers with him versus without him speak for themselves. There's almost a full touchdown difference in the points per game the 49ers allow when he's playing versus not, and that's huge in the NFL. That may not seem like much. That is massive when it was like 7.2 or something, if I remember correctly. It's all I put it all in an article. Sorry, it was a few months ago, so I forget the specifics of it. But yeah, so with Kwaski Tart, I think that would be a massive loss for them. And I hate that that's how it ended because he's a guy who's always been very humble, very hardworking, not very outspoken. And I just hate that that's kind of people's lasting impression of him when he did so much for this team and so much for this organization. So wherever he does end up going, I wish him well. He'll always have, my respect and my admiration for the way he plays the game of football, but I just don't think it will be with the 49ers anymore going forward. K'Wan Williams is another guy where maybe there's not a great alternative out there. It's really hard to ask a guy to come in and play slot corner when you're playing Cooper Kupp twice a year, when you're playing Tyler Lockett twice a year. Now we're going to see Rondale Moore in the slot. Like this division is just loaded with guys that can really give you mismatch problems at that position. I think the problem is, it's so funny. So Brad and I think I've told this on here before, but Brad and I were at the Rams 49ers game. If you guys remember when K'Wan Williams made that like gooch catch. And I was like, man, I don't understand where all this hype comes from because he's a solid player, but people talk about him like he's like the best slot. Yeah. I don't see it personally. Like I think he's a liability in coverage, and then literally the next play he catches a ball against his gooch, which should have been caught. Like that was ridiculous. That was bogus. We got robbed of the greatest
of the gooch catch.
Robbed, dude. All of us. So
robbed.
While I do think that K'Wan Williams has some tendency, like if he gets beat over the top a lot, I think that he is a guy who doesn't really have that top end speed. I think it's the same problem they kind of had. People are like, oh, just put Diamador Lenore in there. Well, I think that's Lenore's problem too. He's a guy, if he doesn't have that safety help over the top, I don't feel great about. We've seen too many teams run those slot fades at them.
Yeah.
He also, again, though, does a lot of things really well, and you have to weigh the fact that like there probably isn't a surefire replacement you're going to get on the market, and unless they've seen massive strides in the development of Lenore since last season, or they feel great about Dante Johnson being that guy going forward, which I think he's a good depth piece. I wouldn't personally start him.
Does Dante come back? Do you think
I would if he's willing to come back and be the third or fourth corner? You absolutely.
I don't think anyone's going to pick him up unless they have experience with him, right?
I mean, they might. He looked pretty good towards the end of that season. And the funny thing is, people always make jokes about him getting cut by the Niners, but guess what? He's been cut by like 7 different teams. And the fact that he's still getting opportunities, there's plenty of guys who get cut and they don't get a phone call ever again. They're done. Their time in the NFL. They had their cup of coffee and they're gone. Dante Johnson's still getting those phone calls. So yes, like, is he? Am I going to count on him to be a starting corner? Like, no. But is he a guy that proved he could come in? Like, week 18, they had Dante Johnson playing in the slot. Then Jaquiski Tartt gets hurt. They moved him to safety. He's playing safety in a win-or-go-home game on the road against an explosive offense. And then 2 weeks later, they're having him guard Devontae Adams in 0-degree weather in Green Bay. And I think he did admirable in both spots. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, okay, well, now I have faith that, he's going to be a lockdown, shutdown corner, start him, have him and Mosley out there. No, I'm not saying that. But if you could bring him back to be a depth piece, like the fact that he's proven he can not only play multiple positions, but can step up in big moments, like, heck yeah, dude, I would love to have that as a guy if something happens to anybody else. Like, yeah, I think they absolutely should. If it's, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record or be cliche or too broad, but a lot of this just comes down to price and circumstance. But he's definitely not a guy where it's like, oh, he's horrible, like, I don't want him back, or he's not worth it. Like, he's a guy that for the right value, like, he gives you tremendous versatility, and that's extremely important.
30-year-old on $1 million contract that can play safety, nickel, and outside corner. That's again, even if you have to live with bumps and bruises, if he does have to come in and play, he's also key special teamer. There's a lot of value that comes from that, and clearly he's loved in the locker room. So yeah, Dante Johnson, I actually think he would be welcomed back. The fan base isn't going to look at it as, oh, where's our Sauce Gardner, or where's our prototypical blue chip cornerback that we're drafting, which I don't know if that's going to actually happen or not. But Dante Johnson is going to be one of those back end pieces that's not going to get a lot of credit, but can fill out the back end of a roster.
What's one thing I wanted to point out too, and I apologize if I'm misquoting, but I remember seeing it. I'm on Twitter a lot, and I see a lot of takes flying around. Eric Crocker, a lot of you guys know, Eric Crocker played in the NFL, was a defensive back, is pretty much the person who I rely on for, if
he's the cornerback GOAT.
Yeah, he's the cornerback GOAT, exactly. I'm pretty sure he said something along the lines, if it wasn't him, I apologize, Eric. I'm pretty sure I saw him say this, though, that like the 49ers scheme doesn't really ask the corners to go above and beyond. And he thought that that's kind of why they haven't invested heavily in getting a shutdown, lockdown corner or moving guys around. Like he said, the scheme really keeps them in a position where they aren't really tasked. Not that they're not asked to do a lot, but it was something along the lines of you can justify not sinking significant capital there because there isn't this massive burden being placed on them based on the scheme.
They're not running a bunch of man concepts where you're getting the number one wide receiver on the outside and it's you versus him, no safety help because they're sending blitzes constant. Like that's kind of like probably what he's talking about. I think,
the biggest problem with the 49ers secondary really was the fact that their number one corner got hurt. And then for the majority of the season when they were struggling, it was early on, and the pass rush hadn't really evolved into the dominant unit we saw close out the season. And when you're building your team based around the fact that, hey, we're going to kind of, we're going to divert more resources to the defensive line than the secondary, you're kind of relying on the defensive line getting pressure to boost up that secondary that may not have the lockdown, shutdown, number one corner, So we saw once that happened, like I can remember towards the back stretch of the season, like all of a sudden everybody stopped complaining about the secondary. And, some people did anyway. Some people like to complain no matter what. But it wasn't this glaring issue that we saw during the first few weeks of the season. So, again, it just comes back to, philosophy. And the 49ers have made it very clear, we're going to pump resources into the defensive line. And then when you couple their track record doing that with what Croc said about them having that, scheme that's not really going to put too much on their plate, it makes sense why they aren't, going out and drafting a guy or trading 2 first-round picks for a Jalen Ramsey or, going out and spending a massive amount of money on a free agent there. At the end of the day, they have a blueprint for how they want to build this team, and it's very clear that they're not going to I don't say overpay, but like reach just because their secondary might have had a bad game here and there. I don't think that the secondary was as bad as people made them out to be, though, too. Like, that's kind of the thing I would end it on, is that, like, I thought that they just kind of were catching strays towards the end of the season. Like, guess what? Every cornerback in the league gets beat. Jalen Ramsey's one of the best cornerbacks in football, and he allowed 150 coverage yards in the Super Bowl. Like, it happens. Like, really good. Like, the only player I can think of that was, like, shut down like that was, like, a few years of, like, Darrelle Revis in the past 15 years or so. Other than that, everybody gets beat. Everybody has tough times. It's hard to cover NFL receivers, but I can't think of the 49ers, secondary ever being this like massive liability down the backstretch of the season that some people kind of made them out to be.
Yeah, no, and people get beat here or there. Again, we saw, Jimmy Ward, again, fan favorite, guy that we've come to love as a fan base. He got cooked a couple times here or there by Cooper Kupp, the Triple Crown winner. Hey, it happens. That's why we play the game. Sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. It happens. So, in that kind of same vein, though, there are a lot of moving parts. It does kind of, I'm hearing what you're saying about the value, or basically what they ask to do of their DBs. Do you see a world that exists where having two extremely solid high-end safeties is almost could be more of a benefit than that, again, blue chip, lockdown cornerback, because of what they do with the scheme under D'Amico Ryans and all those different concepts they run?
Yeah, dude, it's funny. So I don't know. If any of you guys are on Twitter, you probably know. Even people on YouTube, you might know. I got into it with Hawk Blogger. Not into it, but I kind of had like a back and forth with him because I said that Jimmy Ward was a top 10 safety in the league. I think I said it wasn't top. I don't know if it was top 5. It was top 10 for sure. Maybe it was even top 5. But I was like, yeah, I think that Jimmy Ward is a top 10 safety. And this was before last season, and he's like, oh, no way, man. No way, no way you can come away with that. I don't see how anybody watches 49ers play football and can't come away with the fact that Jimmy Ward is, in fact, one of the 10 best safeties in football. His versatility and his ability to come down in the box, to go play the slot, to match up with tight ends outside, to cover the deep third, like, he's phenomenal. And I really liked Jaquiski Tartt, and I think Jaquiski Tartt's versatility is really important. And I saw it earlier. I forget if it was Ellis, and my apologies, maybe it was Ron. Somebody earlier in the chat mentioned that they thought that the symbiotic relationship between a secondary is kind of like what you see from a quarterback or receiver. And it absolutely is. Like, I think people just have it in their minds that, like, you either have a guy who's a shutdown, lockdown corner who plays man-to-man and presses at the line, or you don't. It's not that simple. It's a lot of it comes down to being in the right spot, getting the right depth, reading the right keys from what you're getting from the receiver based on your coverages that you're running. And the more reps you get, the more confident you can be that the player behind you or beside you is going to be in the right spot. And that kind of continuity is so important. And the 49ers have really had that. People thought the secondary was bad. I can promise you, if Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt weren't there, it would be much worse than whatever you've made it out to be in your mind. It would be abysmal. But the fact that those guys are there, it really cleans up a lot of the fact when you're sitting there and you're forced to start rookies who are going to have growing pains. When you're forced to call a guy like Josh Norman, who's probably a little bit beyond their, not probably, he's definitely beyond his peak, and who's a free agent during week 1 for a reason. Like, at the end of the day, the fact that the 49ers were able to have a top 3, they were like 3rd in total defense, and they were top 5 passing defense, and they did that with a revolving door at cornerback and losing their best corner week 1. Like, that's phenomenal. And, D'Amico Ryans deserves a lot of credit. I was one of the, the loudest supporters of D'Amico Ryans when people wanted him fired stupidly.
I couldn't. Oh my God.
Yeah. But the players also deserve a lot of credit for executing the scheme that these coaches, devised. So I'm just throwing it out there. It'd be really hard to have a top 5 passing defense if your secondary was that bad. And so much of that really does come back to the safeties and having the continuity there.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of conversation. Again, I've polled my various platforms, and we've gotten insanely amount of votes that cornerback is the number 1 priority move this offseason. When you have Emmanuel Mosley and Ambry Thomas with his ascension, now they need depth. I think depth we can all agree on. That is a big need moving forward, but maybe they spend elsewhere. They get a little bit more creative in how they build out the defensive back room. And again, like we're kind of talking about, maybe they spend bigger on a safety. Again, I've heard rumors that Jabril Peppers, guys like that, maybe come on over. Who knows? We'll find out. But it does seem like they would benefit from having some high-end safeties in the back end. So we'll see how that continues to play out. But there are some guys kind of getting into the restricted free agent area and exclusive rights free agent. You have Azeez Al-Shaair, who is a restricted free agent, and you have Juwan Jennings, who's an ERFA. What do you see with them? Are those two guys that are going to be on the San Francisco 49ers in 2022 coming up?
Yeah, I think so. Like, Jennings is a guy who I think like absolutely will probably be back. I definitely think that Givens will be too. Like, it's so hard to quantify because it's hard. Like, people be like, "Oh, what did you see from Kevin Givens during the season?" And it's hard because like we were there for watching hundreds of reps during training camp, and I think a lot of these guys simply didn't get the path to reps that they normally would have, just because the team was really good. Hey, it's hard to get receptions consistently when you have to fight for targets with George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. It's hard to get defensive line reps when you're fighting with DJ Jones and Eric Armstead. But Givens, I'm a huge fan of, and I know Eric's in the chat saying he loves him too. He's a phenomenal player. Shout out to my guy Xavier Dixon from NinersNation too. He's a big Givens guy. He's slippery, man. Like, he's one of those guys. Again, I love these big athletic interior linemen that are nimble, that have great footwork, that are just kind of slippery. Like, it's really hard. Like, as an offensive lineman, that's got to be the most frustrating thing ever when you're sitting there against this massive human, but you just can't get your hands on them because they're so shifty.
When you got to bring power, but they're fast and got hands, it puts you in a complete bind, and it's the worst.
I would absolutely say Kevin Givens should be back. And same thing with Juwan Jennings. I think Juwan Jennings is a guy where he kind of, can. I said during training camp when you were there with me, I was like, hey man, like, no offense to Jalen Hurd, I just think those injuries caught up. He doesn't have explosion. He can't separate off man coverage. He just doesn't really look great to me. And he caught 2 passes during 11-on-11s one day, and it was so funny.
2 in a row.
Yeah, and everybody's like, oh, here comes Jalen Hurd. Here comes Jalen Hurd. And I'm like, dude, he's running.
Look at the connection with Trey Lance.
Yeah, he's running crossing routes against soft zone. And I understand, like, dude, I'm there watching it. So, like, I try to add the context. But I said then, I'm like, hey, like, Juwan Jennings is a guy who I think will fill that big slot role that everybody wants to, put Jalen Hurd in. Like, I think that's going to ultimately be his, calling. And he did really well. He had like 28 receptions. I think 23 went for first downs or touchdowns this past season. So what it did to me was that he had a knack for just showing up in big moments. He had a knack for being a guy that you could depend on in the red zone, on third down, moving the chains. And that's really important for a guy who missed the majority of his rookie season. To have that kind of trust for a team that had Super Bowl aspirations, that's making a playoff push, that's a huge deal. So, I agree with Joey Nichols here too. Like, they're going to bring back most of the exclusive rights free agents. I don't see them really letting any of them go. Maybe Hasty, maybe they feel like they can replace his production elsewhere. That would be the one that wouldn't surprise me too much. But like Flanagan Fowles is another one. I love Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. I thought he was a really good special teams player. I thought he was really he played really well when he had to fill in at linebacker a couple times this year. I'm with Joey here. I think who they want back, they will bring back. There's nobody on that list where it's like, oh God, this guy's going to price us out. Like, that's kind of the benefit from a team standpoint of having these guys in that exclusive rights category. It's really not going to break the bank to bring them back.
Exactly. And that really, there's a good list of guys. I mean, Kevin Givens is only 24 years old. Kevin Givens as an exclusive rights free agent. Go watch Kevin Givens against the Dallas Cowboys in the playoff game. The dude was everywhere. He was whooping Connor Williams left and right. Kevin Givens has proven he can be a guy. And again, he's young and he can still develop. He's younger than Contavious Street. So Kevin Givens, again, he's an exclusive rights. He's an ERFA. Same with Juwan Jennings, Jermichael Hasty, DFF. Those round out the ERFAs. But back to Azeez Al-Shaair, who is an RFA, 24 years old. Does Azeez get the bag from someone else? Does someone come calling? Or does the potential injury concern? I mean, you looked at Azeez Al-Shaair at the end of the year. He had 2 full arm braces. Like, he looked like he was playing like he was a robot because let's face it, that dude flies around. He drops his shoulder and he hits people. Do you see a potential outcome where someone outbids for Azeez and they purchase his services, or does Azeez look like he will be back next year?
It wouldn't surprise me because he is really good. Like he's a really good player. For a lot of the season, I'm like, hey, this is the best player on the defense. I had people getting mad at me that I was like, hey, like, yeah, he's better than Drake Greenlaw. Like it's not even about being better than Greenlaw. It's the fact that he, other than maybe Nick Bosa, was
He
their
was
best
so
player
good.
all season. Like he's really, really good. I would hope the 49ers would do whatever they can to keep him. But, if another team running a similar scheme watched 49ers games this year or played the 49ers this year, wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they saw that and they're like, hey, you know what? Like this guy could be a key piece, of our defense moving forward. And again, this is the cost, I think it's funny for how much, okay, they made mistakes, but for how much the 49ers front office and this team has gotten flack, like they've built a really good roster full of really good players. Like they have a lot of very talented players, and you're going to have a hard time keeping all of them. And I think
They might not hit all the time on those top end ones, but drafted free agents like Aziz and Emmanuel Mosley. I mean, they hit it out the ballpark with those guys.
They do a really good job developing guys. Like Kendrick Bourne's another guy who was undrafted. They brought in Mosley was an undrafted guy that they brought in. Jennings is a 7th round pick. Like they've done
Jeff Wilson at one point.
Jeff Wilson undrafted. So. For me, like, dude, blank check. Like, I throw that around like hyperbole. Like, obviously, you're not. Right. If he wants $30 million a year, you're like, all right, well, sorry, dude, this is not going to work for me. But like, he's so good, and I will scream it from the mountaintops again that I firmly believe that Nick Bosa is the only other player who I'm objectively saying from start to finish last season was more important for that 49ers defense, or maybe not more important, but playing at a high level, because I think guys like Jimmy Ward and Armstead are really important too, but. Yeah, Aziz is a baller, dude. He is really good. And, there was talk about maybe them moving on from Greenlaw and, figuring it out. Hey, if they can keep all three of them, like they're not going to be in base defense all the time, and teams are switching to sub packages more. So you're not going to see three linebackers on the field nearly as much. But guess what? If you can throw out Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, and Aziz Al-Shaair, like that's a major win for you and your team. And if one of them were to go down, having the ability to have one of those guys step into that role is massive. It's a huge luxury not many teams may have. So, like, I've seen the idea of, like, trading Greenlaw for, like, a 6th-round pick or something like the 5th-round pick. Hey, having him on the roster to me would be more valuable. Just having that versatility is way more important. So,
trading Dre Greenlaw for a 6th-round pick, that you're not really getting a ton of return on your investment. He was a 6th-round pick. And like you said, at that point, you might as well just write him out. And if you don't plan on re-signing him, that's fine. What are you really going to get in return with the 6th-round pick? Can it be comparable to what Dre Greenlaw was? Potentially. But again, the draft's a crapshoot, and you never really know until they're in your building with your coaches what you're really going to get. So I'd like to see a world where all three return. I agree and would echo the same things that you were saying. Again, Aziz Al-Shaair, we were very excited to watch him in training camp, but as you remember, he got hurt early, and so we really didn't get to watch him much of training camp. But when he came out against Detroit, his hair was all over the place. He was making plays nonstop, and it really continued for most of the year until he got hurt. And then Fred came back, and Fred started playing really, really well. But then when we got all three towards the end, we could kind of see what it would look like with all three of them on the field, and I kind of liked it. Do you see it? Do you see, though, a situation that, let's say, I think we all kind of agree we want Aziz to come back. I think we would imagine Aziz and the 49ers would like to make this work. But what if, again, blank check, Dolphins, Mike McDaniels, just for easy convenience, they have like $68 million in cap space. They throw a deal at Aziz that the 49ers they can't afford it. Do you see that being a potential outcome where someone does come along and they're like, we understand who you guys have to pay, where the pecking order is, and understanding if we give Aziz Al-Shaair a certain deal, the 49ers might not be able to match. Do you think that realm exists?
Yeah, I think it definitely does based on how the 49ers have their big board. If it's me filling it out, there's not another free agent on this team that I'm just objectively 100% prioritizing over Aziz Al-Shaair. And I love DJ Jones. I really like Laken Tomlinson. If it came down to it, I probably would keep Aziz Al-Shaair over both of them, to be honest, just because I think that there's a contingency plan in place where I think you could get at least replaceable average level production from a replacement for Tomlinson or DJ Jones. I don't see who's stepping into that linebacker spot for the 49ers and giving them the kind of production that Azeez Al-Shaair is giving them. Yeah, I can totally see another team wanting him. He's a really good player, dude. If I'm sitting here watching him and thinking that, I can promise you that these talent evaluators who get paid to do this are definitely feeling, probably similar. I'm not saying they have to think the same way I do, but if I see it, I would be shocked if a lot of them didn't too. And he's only 24 and a half. He'll be 25 next season. Like, he's still right in the heart of his prime. He's in his mid-20s, and he's a baller. Like, there's no reason not to bring him back if you're the 49ers unless he's really getting a huge bag somewhere else. And if that's the case, again, hey, more power to him. I'm pro player getting paid, but the 49ers have to not get into – there's not any players, in my opinion. Like last season with Kansas City, it felt like there was a bidding war kind of for Trent Williams services. Hey, Trent Williams, you win that bidding war. It doesn't matter. For me, I don't see a player like that in this free agent class where it's like, hey, you're gonna run the risk of outbidding a lesser team that's probably not going to be competitive, who has a boatload of cap space. You just can't get into that kind of scenario this year, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also, too, like Joey's talking about, you tender him at the second round level. So if someone does decide to throw the bag at him, they're also forfeiting their second rounder. Correct? They're agreeing, and that's part of the tender process. They give up a second round draft pick, and I'm sure the 49ers would be okay with that. I mean, they'd probably want to keep Azeez, but again, turning an undrafted free agent into a second round draft pick as a general manager is going to be a win every single day of the week. And that is the ultimate almost return on investment outside of a first round draft pick in return for Azeez and what he's been able to do. Again, last year was really his first full year with that big role that he had. And we're almost getting towards the end. We've pretty much covered all the free agents. There are a couple more. One guy that I did want to get your thoughts on, because there could be an impact in regards to how it affects Trey Lance, because you and I were both there in training camp and we saw this relationship up close and personal. Trent Sherfield. Do the 49ers bring back Trent Sherfield maybe on a 1-year deal, 2-year deal? He's making a little bit under $1 million right now. He was a primary special teamer in 2021. And again, when we saw Trey Lance get geared up for that start week 17 against the Texans, it was also Trent Sherfield getting geared up because he knew he was going to be playing a lot. Is there a situation where they want to keep those two together? Or is it a situation where they just have so many other priorities that it's just, if they can get them, great. If they can't, they can't.
Hey, man, with all due respect to Trent Sherfield, like he is what he is. He's a special teamer who's a 4th or 5th wide receiver on most NFL teams. And I think he's good at his job in that capacity. That's not, a slight on him. He's a player in the NFL. He's not a guy where I'm like, he had some chemistry with Trey Lance in, his first training camp. We have to keep him. Like, no, I don't think it's like that at all. I think he does provide value. Like, I think the 49ers learned the hard way this year that maybe it is better to pay a little extra to have a guy who you can trust on special teams and have a guy who's reliable. So if you can double as the 4th or 5th wide receiver too, that's great. I personally think there's a few guys out there who are free agents who I'd like to see them add to the receiver room. So I'm not like, pounding the table. They have to bring Trent Sherfield back. But in that capacity, yeah, he was fine, and they paid him $900,000. Like, that's great. But again, when it's a salary cap league like the NFL is, you have to weigh cost, value, all that stuff. And I'm not really seeing, something from Trent Sherfield where I'm like, okay, well, let's sign him to a 2-year, $6 million deal or something. Like, you can find another guy that can be a special teams player and contribute and be a reliable 4th or 5th option. And if he gets paid somewhere else, like, hey, again, more power to you, dude. I support all these guys securing as much money as they can. I just don't think the 49ers should be the one shelling out every single one of these contracts because just statistically, they're not all going to work out. And at the end of the day, Trent Williams is not Trent Williams. Trent Williams is not a replaceable player. Trent Sherfield is a guy who is a replaceable player.
Because the other one is irreplaceable. Trent Sherfield, I hear exactly where you're coming from. I would love to see him come back on a 1-year. If you can get him on a duplicate deal, hell yeah, I'll take it. Because the 49ers do have some back-end wide receiver positions to fill. Because clearly right now, only Debo and Ayuk are officially under contract. Now, Juwan is a ERFA. We expect him to come back. But then after that, there's not a lot of guys. I don't think Travis Benjamin's going to be walking through those doors again, or hopefully he's not. But we'll find out. There's going to be continued movement with that position. I think, was there one more person that I really wanted to talk about? I mean, we got pretty much through it all. Just quickly, Marcel Harris, converted safety to linebacker. He started one game. What do you think about him?
I think they could have Talanoa Hufanga do a lot of the stuff they asked Harris to do, honestly. So again, like, hey, if it's a palpable number that's not gonna affect them losing another player, like, sure. But I also think this is another situation where, hey, if you draft it, like, I know a lot of people want to see Talanoa Hufanga start if they let Tart walk. I would not want to see that yet, unless he makes a massive leap in this offseason. I don't want to see that. I want no parts of that. I thought that there was a lot left to be desired from him in terms of coverage, but I thought when he played down near the box, he was very instinctual. He was very good against the run when he was in these, closer to the line of scrimmage and those kind of situations. So if he can do that, the way Harris kind of transitioned into that role, like, absolutely, that'd be great. If you want to throw him out there in this kind of weird hybrid where it's like almost like a 4-3, but you're having a like converted safety play that third linebacker spot, like, yeah, I think it'd be great. But I think Hufanga does that really well, and I think that's a role where you can get some value coming out.
You got the Jordan A. Smith.
Hey,
nice one, JC. That one worked well.
Big ass forehead like him too, dude.
I love it, man. It's so good. This has been a good episode, man. We've been talking about a lot. Jordan's been dropping nugget after nugget after nugget. As you can see, this man is well tapped in with the San Francisco 49ers. I think we know the answer to it. Quick yes or no. Mohamed Sanu, does he come back? Does he go?
I don't know. I mean, he's a reliable, like, veteran piece they can keep in the receiver room. I don't think they're gonna like bend over backwards to sign him. But again, if he's a guy that's willing, the 49ers are going to need guys to come back on veteran minimum deals. And some of these guys might be like, hey, we were on the cusp of a Super Bowl. Sanu's gotten,
he had a good relationship with Trey Lance. Remember, they're training together in the offseason.
I don't know if you guys have seen, but that man has a pretty sweet ride, dude. He's definitely made some money in his time in the NFL. So
he's made money. He's got the bag. It's not a problem.
That man's got drip, bro. So he might be somebody who's like, hey, you know what? I've made money. I'm happy taking a vet minimum deal. I feel like I can get that elusive Super Bowl ring that I haven't gotten yet. We were so close. I like, a lot of these guys really do speak really highly of Kyle Shanahan too. And I think having Kyle Shanahan build that respect and rapport with players does go a long way when you are kind of like, we only have X amount of dollars. If you want to come back on this veteran minimum deal, we can make it work. If not, there's the door. So maybe Sanu's one of those guys, but I didn't think he was bad. I thought, and he's another guy, he's big. He's a good run blocker. You have to be willing to block, but I like Juwan Jennings a lot, man. I just, maybe it's insurance if something were to happen to Jennings, but at the end of the day, like, you're probably going to keep 5, maybe 6 at most receivers, and 3 of those spots are pretty much spoken for. 2 for sure, 3 are pretty much spoken for. So you're kind of getting down to, you need somebody, in my opinion, you need a guy who can be a special teams contributor. So like if it was like between Sherfield and Sanu, I would probably lean Sherfield just because he gives you that versatility as a special teams player that I wouldn't expect from Mohamed Sanu at this point. He's like 30, what is he, 32 now? 32 and a half.
32 now.
Yeah, so I wouldn't expect him to be out there, covering punts and stuff. And that's no disrespect to him. It's just I wouldn't expect that from most receivers who are in their mid-30s, or early 30s, respectfully. Sorry, Mr. Sanu.
Respectfully.
Hey, I'm getting there soon too, man. I'm trying to be.
You're not. Calm your little boy butt down. You're not getting close to 30. Calm down, boy. But with Mohamed Sanu, I wouldn't mind him coming back for a year if they fit into the. I think Mohamed Sanu might have future wide receiver coach for Kyle Shanahan, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road, if that's something that he would come back on a cheap deal. But again, I think a lot of us are starting to shift towards the draft, right? Like, we're like, wide receiver is nice, but we know we're going to shell out to get Deebo Samuel paid. Brandon Ayuk's still around. He's a first rounder. He's going to need to be paid in maybe 2 years or so. Juwan Jennings, we'll figure that out. But it might benefit the 49ers to fill out the back end of that roster with potential draft picks. Again, multiple guys, through whatever rounds you want to grab them. But we see it time and time again. Rookie wide receivers can translate early. So maybe that's where they just opt to go towards. And maybe they just go cost controlled rookies. And they have their front end guys. They know who's going to carry the load anyways. So maybe that's a route they go. Who knows? Anything else as we wrap up the entirety of the who stays, who goes conversation surrounding the 49ers free agents, because free agency is coming up in about 3 weeks. So, and the tag period began today. We already saw some player movement. Anthony Hitchens, linebacker captain for the Chiefs, he was released. So we're going to start seeing some player movement. We're going to start seeing all kinds of stuff. The combine starts next week, Jordan. In a week from today, the bubble combine has been popped. It's regular combine now. So what are you looking forward with the combine coming up and really transitioning into full-blown draft season?
Well, I am trying to figure out if I'm going to go or not, because I write for people who don't know, like I write for SB Nation. And, if I can sort out my details here, I probably will be there covering it next week. I know Jason Aponte got his credentials approved today. So if I go, I probably will be with Jason goofing around South Central Indiana, wherever Indianapolis is, somewhere in the middle of that state out there in the Midwest. Never been there. I don't know, So I will be there if things work out. As I open with, I just got done moving, so I have a mountain of boxes to my left, and I, not just one or two. I have way more stuff than I need, so I'm trying to sort through stuff, figure out, donate some of the stuff I have, all that, all the fun stuff that comes with moving and getting into a new place. So I don't want to say, I'll see you guys from Indianapolis next week. Let's do a show. But
could be coming.
If I could figure things out here and make sure that my stuff's squared away and take care of all the grown adult responsibilities that I wake up despising every single day, then I probably will be out there. But if not, I know Jason will be. Yeah. JC knows. And hey, man, I'm just saying, the combine's going to go on with or without me, but I'm sure they would love to have me around. But we'll figure it out. I'm really excited for it. I'm starting to get into draft stuff. I finally have had a chance to dive into some all-22. I found some guys that I really like. I know Brad last night, it was 1 a.m. I know he found a draft crush late night last night. So about that time, man, we're figuring it out.
It is about that time.
We're going to get ready to find all these guys we really like, and then get ready to just get, our hearts ripped out over and over when the 49ers choose not to pick those players over and over and over again. A tradition as old as time. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait. It's going to be a fun little bit of time. And then hopefully, OTAs will come around and we'll have some fresh content. We'll be covering OTAs and stuff. So I'm excited, man. It's coming along.
The combine's going to be here before you know it, and if we get sideline Aponte and sideline Elliott out there on the field, that would be fire. We got to make that happen. But really, there's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe, and too with the draft stuff. Last year we did first round mocks quite a bit. With the 49ers sitting there at 12, you and I would go through an entire first round. We would mock it out. The 49ers aren't picking in the first round. What are we going to do this year, Jordan? Are we going to do 2-round mocks? So we got to buff up our skills a little bit more, make sure we get all those prospects scouted and start doing 2-round mocks. How are we going to do this? Cuz we got to pick these up here pretty soon.
I've been up watching day 3 guys at 2 a.m, and I have people that are just I don't know how you're doing that. I don't know. I'm not wasting time watching these guys. But hey, that's how committed we are to the grind, man. I'm serious. Yeah. I love doing this shit, man. This for me is a dream. I love being able to have a platform to do this and have people just remotely care about what I have to say. So I'm going to put the work in. I know Brad is too. But that's pretty much what we're going to have to do, Brad, is start watching guys day 2, day 3 guys. I found a couple players that I really like that I'm not hearing much talk about. And I'm how is this not happening? And I'm waiting, maybe that'll change in the coming weeks. Maybe the combine changes things. But that's kind of the fun of doing this, is that, not many people, there's great follows out there. If you guys are really into draft stuff, there's great follows that are going to cover draft stuff. Like Ryan Roberts does a really good job at Rise and Draft. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's really good. He's on Twitter. He does a lot of really good scouting work. But Ryan has to do that for 32 teams. He doesn't get to just sit there and talk about the 49ers. So what Brad and I can do is we can look at all these prospects, and there's going to be a lot of really good players, but they wouldn't be scheme fits for the 49ers. They may not fit in. Maybe, the 49ers may not need to go out and draft a quarterback this year. So we're probably not going to spend too much time. As much as I like Malik Willis, I'm not going to waste my time scouting him because guess what? The 49ers have Trey Lance. So what we can do is we can offer a certain level of precision and analysis for this that's tailored towards the 49ers needs, which is, again, really hard. It doesn't take away anything from these guys who do draft stuff 365 days a year. They just don't have the ability to only talk about the 49ers or only talk about the Cowboys or whatever, insert whatever team here. Brad and I do. So that's where I think we have a little bit of our own lane here is we can do this draft stuff, but do it specifically based around guys that we think would fit really well into the 49ers in 2022 and beyond as this team really starts to build itself around their young core, but most importantly, Trey Lance and who we think can make him the most successful going forward.
Absolutely. And that's what's so freaking exciting about the draft. And the 49ers have a good amount of picks, too. And they have the flexibility to move around. They got a nice, shiny asset in Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's a lot of stuff that could be moving around. So we got to start figuring that out. We'll get to the bottom of it, and we'll come back to you guys with how we're going to do it. But these mock draft shows are going to be lit. So make sure you tap in for that. And especially when we go full draft mode, woo, it's going to be fun. I like I said, it was like 1:00 last night, and my heart's like palpitating because I came across some random offensive lineman, and I'm like, who is this guy?
Brad and I, for those who are like newer to his channel or didn't watch, Brad and I did 6 hours straight on day 2 of the draft last year. I'm not talking like I'm talking. I did not get up from my desk for 6 hours, dude. Like it was just And I loved every minute of it. It was fun, but I might build in some bathroom breaks this time because my bladder definitely wasn't enjoying it. But we pushed through, man, and that was that's where champions are made. What's that saying? Like, tough times don't last, tough people do. Let me tell you.
Exactly. We grinded it out.
Fighting that
like,
day, man. Fighting.
Definition of a grind. That was intense as hell. We'll definitely get it much more ironed out as we continue to move on. But Jordan, as we continue to prep for the draft, prep for the combine that's coming up in a week, I'm sure both you and I are going to be doing prospect watches for which guys to look out for, risers, fallers. Where can they see more of your content, follow you, read more of your work?
So I write at NinersNation, so you can find me there. I'm a staff writer over there, so I do a few posts a week normally. I haven't written anything in about a week or so again because I've been moving. So I am going to get back on that today. I will be writing a piece tonight about 5 guys who I think would be ideal backups for Trey Lance.
The burger joint?
What?
The burger joint?
I'll be writing about backup quarterbacks today. So a very exciting topic. I know you guys will just be anxious to see it drop tomorrow morning.
Do you want to give them a little bit of the backup thought process, or are we just going to tease it and they got to read the article?
Yeah. So my whole thought process is like, I think people get caught up in like you want a guy that's going to be able to come in and operate the same offense. And obviously Trey Lance has rushing ability. To me, it isn't as much about finding a guy who's particularly mobile. Like, yes, it's a plus, but I don't think you need a guy who can come in and just drop design runs for, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that's a necessity, but I do think you need a guy who can operate an offense under center and who has the mobility to get out to the edge on some of these bootlegs and these big,
can run zone read concepts.
Can run zone read to an extent, but it's not going to be like, you don't have to only get mobile guys. And I think the other thing is balancing between so this for me, it's going to be ideal. So I'll throw that out there. Cause I said previously that hey, a guy like Marcus Mariota or Mitch Trubisky, there's going to be some quarterback jobs that are going to be filled by guys who objectively aren't very good, unfortunately. And I say that with all due respect. I know Dylan said something earlier about how, I say mean things in a nice way. Like, I try to be respectful.
Hey, that one almost sent me through the roof.
Hey, I wouldn't have a job doing this if it wasn't for these guys playing this sport. So I try to approach it with the most respect that I possibly can. But at the end of the day, I also try to keep it a buck, dude. And unfortunately, 100%. There are 32 guys, I think, in the NFL who I would objectively say are a starting level quarterback. So guys like Marcus Mariota, maybe a Mitch Trubisky, even a Tyrod Taylor, in reality, they might have an opportunity to go elsewhere where it's like, hey, you can compete for a starting job somewhere. You can come in and we'll allow you to kind of, push for a starting job here. And that I wouldn't blame any of them if they felt that was a more compelling thing for them, not only just from a monetary standpoint, but for more playing time, rather than, hey, Trey Lance is our guy. If you want to come in, hold a clipboard, we'll pay you a good amount of money, teach this this young quarterback what it means to be a pro in this league and help with his development. I don't blame anybody for wanting to have a shot at the playing time. I would hope somebody, like the person I would want on my team, would have that competitive spirit and want to compete for a starting job. I don't see a scenario where the 49ers sign Marcus Mariota and they're like, hey, we'll allow you to have it's an open quarterback competition with you and Trey Lance. Because no offense to Marcus Mariota, if he were to beat out Trey Lance and start week 1, that would be a huge red flag for the 49ers and the organization as a whole. So I don't see that really being like a selling point for them, if that makes sense. But in an ideal world, which is, again, what my article will be based on, in an ideal world, you can, if Trey Lance were to have a knee sprain again or have a finger injury again like he had, you could turn the keys over to a Marcus Mariota who's had success, or to a Tyrod Taylor who's led a team to the playoffs, or to a Mitch Trubisky, who I used to get a ton of crap for saying, hey, you know what? I don't think he's a great quarterback, but I think he's also being held back by this offense in Chicago. If you put him in a decent scheme, I think he could start in the NFL. All of a sudden now, he spends 1 year in Buffalo, and everybody's like, oh, hey, Mitch Trubisky would be
He learned from Josh Allen, so he's and we've heard the reports. Even today, I think he's peak confidence. Everything he's watched, he's ready to go. Locked and loaded, Mitch Trubisky.
I just want to throw it out there. I've been Team Mitch from the beginning, and if the 49ers were able to get Mitch Trubisky, like, hey, I think it would be great if they were able to get Marcus Mariota. Any of these guys, you could feasibly turn the keeper. So that's kind of what it's going to be about. Like, in an ideal world, it'd probably be one of those guys. But again, I do preface that with, like, I don't think that it's a reality that you can just be like, hey, come back up Trey Lance. And these guys are like, oh, okay. Like, hey, it sounds great. That's what I've been waiting my whole life for. Like,
yeah, like I see the path for my starting any day now. It's just going to open. No, if you're coming to back up Trey Lance and you're not like Tom, if you're backing up Trey Lance, you're only coming in case of an injury. You're a break glass in case of injury kind of situation. So it's not a path forward to getting reasonable snaps throughout the regular year where you can maintain your starting level. Now, but if you are a Mitch Trubisky, like just say, for example, we're throwing stuff against the wall now, he does come in and back up Trey Lance. Trey Lance does go down. Trubisky, if you get him on like a 2-year deal and he comes out, wins you 5 to 6 games with Kyle Shanahan showing those types of things, you're flipping him and getting a decent haul in return. So it goes both ways. But I like the Mitch. I like the Mitch stuff. If he somehow ended up, my dynasty stocks wouldn't be happy about it because he's not starting, obviously. But he would be a good backup quarterback, and I think he would.
Even like Teddy Bridgewater, if the Broncos don't choose to bring him back, he was playing on a $5 million deal last year. Like, he's a guy, again, where I could see another team not feeling great, and he has starting experience. They don't feel great about their own spot, so maybe they put him in there. But, like, there are going to be guys out there. Like, look at the Seahawks. Like, with Geno Smith, like, when Russell Wilson went out, I don't think Geno Smith was the reason they lost games. I thought they lost games just because they were a poorly constructed roster and they weren't very good. Obviously, there's an arguable drop-off from Russell Wilson to Geno Smith. But I also thought Geno Smith was hitting some throws that Russell Wilson couldn't hit over the middle of the field. So it's like, if you can get in that situation where your backup isn't the reason you're losing games, that's a major win for me. And with a guy like Tyrod Taylor, like, yeah, there's obviously going to be the connection that he has to Anthony Lynn. So maybe that's something where it's like you can convince him to come in like that. Again, I think we get so caught up in watching these guys as just what we see on the field that we forget, like, hey, I've had opportunities before where I've turned down less money or less, prestige at a job because I'm like, hey, I really enjoyed working with this specific set of coworkers. To me, you're not offering me enough to the point where I'm going to go to a place where I'm not going to be comfortable working. Maybe Tyrod Taylor and these NFL players feel that same way, where it's like, hey, I have familiarity with Anthony Lynn. I hear nothing but good things about Kyle Shanahan. And at the end of the day, I can probably go into this offense and not really even do much of anything other than help Trey Lance get better. And there's a chance next year that just simply being in the building with Kyle Shanahan and Anthony Lynn, I might get a chance to start next year. Like, it's wild that that's how it works out, but it really does. Right. And that's, it's kind of how things play out. So I don't think it's any of that's like set in stone. But I also do think that, again, we have to remember that some of these guys that people want to back up the Trey Lance and the 49ers quarterback room and whatnot, if you want them that bad and you think they're that good, other teams might think that about them potentially starting for them. Like Gardner Minshew is another guy. Like I think Gardner Minshew would be a great backup if he was able to come. It would just be, dude, it would be content central. He's just another guy. Dude, Gardner Minshew and George Kittle in the same locker room. Oh man! Like,
my goodness!
Two of the goofiest dudes you'll ever see in the NFL. Like that for me would be awesome. And he's a guy who I think, again, you just need to get a guy who can come in and not be the reason you lose. They don't have to be the reason you win. They just can't be the reason you lose. And I think there's a lot of guys out there who fit the bill. So that's going to be kind of the basis of my article, is just finding guys that would be an appropriate stopgap in that break glass in case of emergency. Because I would end it on I've seen a couple people say, like, well, if Trey Lance goes out for the season, like Trey Lance goes out for the season, the 49ers season is over. Like, I hate to put it that way. Like, they're not winning a Super Bowl if the backup quarterback.
Sudfeld, baby, he's going to lead us to the promised land. Put some respect on Sudfeld.
Nick Foles changed the fucking outlook on that forever, man. Nick Foles went on that crazy run and beats Tom Brady. Yeah. Everybody's like, hey, well, he won a Super Bowl as a backup. Guess what? That's probably, if Nick Foles got hurt, if Carson Wentz got hurt in week 6, no disrespect to Nick Foles, the odds are that the Eagles aren't the 1 seed throughout the playoffs, and they probably aren't going to the Super Bowl that year. It's unrealistic. Like the Colts offensive coordinator, Tom Moore, I think he's with the Buccaneers now. He's like 82 now, man. He's been around the NFL a long time. He was asked one day why they don't give any practice reps to the backup quarterback when he was in Indianapolis, when the Colts had, Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne and Peyton Manning. And he basically said, if Peyton Manning goes down, we're screwed. And you don't practice screwed. He used a different word that I'm trying not to swear on Brad's channel, but he basically said, you don't practice you don't practice for that situation. Like, there's no amount of practice or preparation.
We don't practice to lose. That's not what we're trying to do.
Like, if you lose your starting quarterback like that, the season's pretty much over. You can't practice for that situation. But if Trey Lance is out for a week or two, or he has, an injury from rushing or something like that, you can find plenty of guys that can come in and just kind of, I don't want to say hold the steering wheel while it's on cruise control, but pretty much that. Like, make sure the car doesn't go off the side of the road. Like, yeah, you can find that. Like,
right. So, as we've detailed here, this offseason is going to be wild. It is going to be wild. There's going to be players that come back that we didn't think were coming back. There are players that are going to go that we for sure thought were coming back. They're going to add. They're going to subtract. There's an opportunity that things that we aren't even thinking of are going to happen. Trades, other things. So it's just going to be a wild ride. It's just getting started. Do you know exactly when the new league year starts? Is it like this?
I think it's March. It's the 14th or the 16th at noon.
I think it's March 16th.
Yeah, noon.
And then the 14th is the legal tampering, right?
That's what I think. I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So coming up to March 14th, we have NFL Combine. We have all kinds of stuff. We have the tag period now. Clearly, we're starting to see player movement. So these next 3 weeks leading up into free agency is going to be nuts. It's going to be a slow trickle, but it will start to occur. So it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be interesting to see what is going down. But like we talked about, the NFL Combine will be on Tuesday. So I'm going to try to get Jordan back on here maybe this week if I can get him. I know he's moving and getting all that stuff going. We got Luke saying, tattooing and listening, fam. Cheers, splash from Luke Luna. Shouting out the boy. But maybe we get something back on Friday. I don't know. I want to get Jordan back here because I do want to do all draft only, like the good old days, and we start really talking about pre-combine, start talking about prospects and stuff like that. But we'll get to that offline. Again, make sure you are following Jordan at Splash Cousin on Twitter, and make sure you're reading him at NinersNation.com. Jordan, anything you wanted to end it on?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to my guy Luke Luna and everybody else in the chat. I know my guy JC's in here, Ellis has been in here, Dylan's been in here, Hendricks has been in here. All you guys, like, it's been fun, man. Thanks. This was a fun live. I needed it. It's been a long week of literally just hauling boxes around and packing up stuff and just like not fun. I don't enjoy it at all. I do enjoy talking about football. So this has been a great stress relief for me, so I appreciate it. And you guys already, like, Brad's a goat, man. If he asked me to come, I'll come. The only time I really can't was when I literally was like, hey, man, I got to be out of this apartment by a certain day. Sorry, I can't do it.
I got to literally move my entire life. I can't go on live with you.
Yeah, I can move my schedule. But when I have to move my things, that kind of comes first. So,
but when my life is on the move.
Yeah, exactly. You let me know. I'll find a way, and hopefully I'll get all my pictures and everything back up so you guys don't just see me behind this like boring blank wall behind me. But I promise you it's better than the mountain of boxes and stuff to my left that, would be forced to be looked at in the background. So, yeah, we'll figure it out, man.
Absolutely. Hendrick says, Jordan, good luck unboxing. You showed me the boxes. You have a task in front of you.
Thank you. Hey, you know what the good thing is? Hey, I live on the 3rd floor and I have a patio. So if I really get that sick of it, I'm just gonna yell 4 and start chucking stuff off the top of the balcony. So.
My goodness, that would be quite the sight. But thank you to everyone who tuned in for the show, listening to Jordan's fire takes per usual. And like I said, I got to get this man back sometime this week because we got to get ready to talk draft. Tons of prospects are going to be going to Indianapolis. Jordan might be going Indianapolis to cover it as well. So got to get that locked in. Again, follow him where you can find all his stuff. I will see you guys tomorrow, and we'll do it again.